Retro.
Hi, this is Emily Swallow, the Armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Hello there, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krabs.
The bad news, it's Monday, but the good news is that means we're talking about another episode of the Clone Wars as part of our Clone Wars rewatch. Jay will go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are before we get started.
Absolutely. It's always a great way to start the week with Clone Wars. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The digital line, the signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So today we are talking about episode 13 from season 3, which is called Monster. And it is the second episode in a trilogy of episodes dealing with Nightsisters and Nightbrothers and the like. And there's a lot of fun things to talk about with this episode. But before we get into the details, just going to remind you all it's a full spoiler discussion. And then, Jay, I'm going to ask you for the summary of this episode, please.
You got it. And first, I think it's so hilarious on Disney Plus how it just simply says for the description, Dooku wants a deadlier apprentice.
Yeah.
Not good, right? But here's our summary. After Count Dooku visits Mother Talzin, Asajj Ventress begins the process of selecting a powerful male to train as an apprentice. She travels to the Nightbrother village and engages in a series of trials to pick a champion. Savage Oppress wins the trials, and the Nightsisters use their magic to transform him into a towering warrior before handing him over to Count Dooku. Dooku then tests Savage's abilities by having him destroy a Jedi outpost on the planet of Deveron.
There's a lot of fun things to discuss with this episode. Dark things, but fun things nonetheless. Yes. What did you think about this one overall?
Well, dark things are so much fun to discuss just in general. I don't know what it is about that. But first of all, the fortune cookie, I think, stands out to me. Evil is not born, it is taught. And so that really speaks volumes about everything going on with Savage in this particular episode, and also kind of where Asajj's background comes from as well. And we can liken the both of those together and kind of compare and contrast both of those as well. But overall, this is, again, as you said, a very dark episode, but a standout one in that it really highlights a lot of the history of the Nightbrothers. And especially going back to where Darth Maul was originally from and his clan and all the things. So it's just so great. We're going to get to talk about all this. I'm excited. But what about you?
Yeah, I like this a lot. I love this trilogy. I have, as I mentioned last week, I have a very nostalgic pull to this trilogy episodes, and that was getting the opportunity to take a very young DJ to see these 3 episodes together at the movie theater as part of a local screening before they came out, like weeks in advance of when they debuted, because it was the episode 12 debuted after a mid-season break. And so there'd been several weeks. We got 1 through 11 of that season, and they took a several weeks break, and then they debuted 12 and then 13, 14, which is a trilogy. And so we got to go see them right before Christmas, and it was a lot of fun. The 501st was there. I know I mentioned this on the last episode, but I'm repeating myself. And they had little games before they showed these episodes, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a great opportunity to connect with a lot of other Star Wars fans, and especially in such a niche way. I mean, it's not like it was a movie. It was 3 episodes of the Clone Wars, not even the Clone Wars movie, right? It was these 3 episodes there on the big screen. Fun way to watch them for the first time. So again, I'm babbling about my nostalgia for this, but the other thing is that, the episode guides get better and better for the Clone Wars the further we go. And one of the things I really appreciate was the little featurette that Dave Filoni did on this. And the big point he was making is that along with the fortune cookie that you were just talking about, that, evil isn't born, it's taught. He brings up this question. Does Ventress understand that she's doing to Savage Oppress what Dooku did to her? And at this point, the answer is a clear no in this regard.
Correct. Yes.
And, he also makes the point that she's got a long way to expel the poison that was put in her. And what I find remarkable about that statement is that how many years ago was that made? That was made when they were putting the Clone Wars out on Blu-ray, before Asajj Ventress ever showed up in the novel, and before she ever showed up in the Tales of the Underworld series,
Right.
here, before we got to really see her redemption in this regard. And so he clearly had some long-term thoughts about where Asajj was going, and she was nowhere near her redemption at this point. So anyways, that was just one of the things that stood out to me when I was preparing for this discussion.
No, I think that's phenomenal to point out, and it just shows, as you pointed out, what a far-reaching thinker Dave Filoni was, even at this point in time, because we didn't know where Asajj's story was going to blossom, as far as the lore and the storytelling and the background of her, as you mentioned, with a lot of these other pieces of media material. So I think that's awesome.
So the episode starts with Dooku arriving on Dathomir, and he's meeting with Talzin, and the conversation turns to a bit where he's got this old alliance with her, and she is trying to pay off a debt. He helped her out with something, and he even invites her and the Nightsisters to join the Separatist Alliance. She's like, forget that. I'm paying off a debt, and then I hope to never see you again.
Yep.
And we kind of were talking about that last week, and I forgot this aspect of this trilogy, that, because one of the questions you posed last week was, why is Talzin even getting involved in this? What is her motivation in this regard? And we get the hint and an answer right here, which is that she's looking out for her clan, clearly, and Asajj Ventress is now part of the clan, and it's under the guise of, I have an old debt and I am taking care of a couple problems at one time.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if this is just kind of a convenient storytelling vice that was, I don't want to say thrown in there, because I don't think, as I was just saying, that anything is just thrown in for no reason. But what was that debt? I would love to know what Dooku helped her with, and where that kind of, because I don't know if that's ever been explored. Do you know?
I didn't get the opportunity. There was other things about this episode I researched, and then I forgot to go back and look this up. So maybe I'll do that later, and then we can discuss it on the podcast. But I'm not aware. But here's the thing that I do know. It had to be when Dooku was a Jedi, because he hasn't been a Sith all that long.
Right. Either that, or when he was even younger as a Count on Sereno.
And we also know from Tales of the Jedi, he was kind of going all over the place doing stuff with Qui-Gon. So that's the other question I have. Was Qui-Gon there whenever this happened? Like I said, I don't know that this story has been told to everyone. And, you and I maybe have a discussion all for naught, that, some of our listeners that are bigger geeks than us are probably going, you idiots, we know this answer, but I'm unaware of it. And I feel like I should be aware of it if it had actually happened. And so this kind of seems like a story that needs to be told to me.
Yes, I agree. So if anyone out there listening knows where this story is told, if it is, hit us up, podcaststardust@gmail.com.
Yeah. There's kind of a fun Easter egg at this point where Talzin offers him a blackroot drink, which is lifted from Willow. So that was a neat
cool.
little Easter egg there.
I think I've only ever seen that movie twice in my entire life, so I would never have picked that up. Yeah, I need to watch it again.
I watched it, and I don't want to get off too much on the side here, but when that movie came out, I know I saw it in the theaters at least 3 or 4 times, and then when it was out on VHS, probably another half dozen times at that point. But after that, It's been very sporadic. I probably only see it like once every 7 or 8 years or so. I watched it a couple years ago when the Willow series came out on Disney Plus. I watched it as kind of a prequel to get me prepared. And then they didn't have season 2 of the Willow series, and they completely deleted it off of Disney Plus. You can't even watch it there anymore. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. I'll have to figure that out. But I do think it's fantastic that they insert those Easter eggs from different franchises that, a lot of fans know and love.
especially from Lucasfilm, whether
Yes.
it's with Indiana Jones
Mhm.
and the droids showing up
Right.
there and the likes. But here's the other thing, and I'm curious your thoughts about this, is that Dooku is aware of Maul. And not that I don't expect him to be, but Talzin's talking about the opportunity to get into prison from the same bloodline that Maul came from. And Dooku recognizes him as a powerful Sith warrior, doesn't say anything disparaging, doesn't say anything about how he's superior, but he recognizes the value in that. What do you think
Mhm.
about that?
Well, as I was watching this, I was of two different minds, I guess you could say, because on the one side, I thought, okay, well, that's really cool that Dooku is really appreciating the fact that these warriors are vicious and, cunning and skilled and, but then on the other side, I'm thinking to myself, but he knows that, you know, there was not a good ending for those skills. So why would he want to delve into the same type again?
Yeah, you know, Dooku is aware that Maul was defeated by Obi-Wan Kenobi. He
Right.
says it out in this entire thing. And
Mhm.
so, and he knows Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's a powerful warrior and the likes. The other thing that occurs to me with all this is that, skipping ahead in this is that Asajj goes to the Night Brothers village, and we're going to talk about the Night Brothers here in just a second because I'm really confused about the relationship of Night Brothers and Zabrak and the Dathomir witches and other Zabraks across the galaxy. And I've done some research into that. But the point is that Asajj goes to the Night Brothers village, has these trials, and brings back Savage Oppress. And he's a strong looking guy, but he's not the hulking monstrosity that the Nightsisters turn him into with their force magics there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Meanwhile, Maul is, by comparison, much more of an average physique. So did they not do the same things with him? Did they not infuse him with their force abilities and magic and stuff like that? I don't know that we have an answer to that, but he didn't turn out and just be some hulking brute. He's this, I don't want to say virgins, but like the dark side of the force like just flows right through Maul by comparison there. So I'm just kind of curious what the difference was in that regard.
Right. So there's two things that I want to point out there. In that, number one, with Dooku, I was kind of answering my own question here, in that, as we know, Dooku eventually is going to want to overthrow Sidious. I mean, that's just
Right.
the way of the Sith, it's the rule of two. And so he had Asajj as his apprentice so that maybe eventually she could take up that mantle. So perhaps he wanted a Zabrak, just like Maul, to almost like stick it in the face of Palpatine, like your Zabrak didn't become successful, but mine's going to, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And then the other thing that I thought too was, because I thought about that as well. I was thinking, okay, well, why did they not augment Darth Maul to be this hulking monster, as you put it, like Savage Oppress? But then I think our answer is because Maul, even though his physique wasn't necessarily as intimidating, his inner spirit was already that bad. And
Hmm.
so, because as we see in this episode, Savage actually has a little bit of a conscience. He has these caring kinds of feelings for his brothers, whereas I don't know that Darth Maul ever did. And if he did, maybe Talzin did actually, magic that out of him, but didn't augment him physically. So
It,
I think that there's a couple of different ways that could go.
It's kind of the reverse attachment thing that the Jedi
Yeah.
are worried about right there. It's the, the Jedi are worried about you having an attachment because it'll send you down the path to the dark side. Whereas we see with the Sith, it's like, it's that fear of loss and that attachment that fuels you in this case. And with Savage, his brother Farrell there in the village, which is interesting because in later episodes, Maul is being described as one of Savage's brother, and Savage calls him a brother in this regard. So I guess there was multiple brothers, but regardless, it's this one of the final tests after they convert Savage Oppress with the Nightsister magic into this hulking brute is that he has to kill Farrell, who he went out of his way to protect earlier, and he mindlessly does so in that regard. So it's kind of like his ability to I got this attachment and I'm overcoming it. I'm destroying the attachment that is giving him strength in regard. So that kind of stood out to me as an interesting comparison to what the Jedi think of when it comes to attachments.
Yes. And when you pointed out the whole brother versus sister thing too, I think to myself, how much of it is actually quote unquote direct bloodline? Are they actually true brothers and sisters, or is it just like a clan name that these are my brothers, almost like a fraternity kind of thing, and that they're all from the same sort of bloodline, but they're not from the exact same bloodline. Like they're cousins.
It's really confusing when it comes down to it. I mean, we come to find out later that Maul is Talzin's son somehow. And okay, fantastic. But the sisters, it's almost like this is a lousy comparison, but a convent of nuns, right? Everyone calls each other sister, yada, yada, yada. And we know they're all not blood sisters and the like. But it gets into this larger question. When The Phantom Menace came out, Darth Maul was identified as a Zabrak. And we've had plenty of content that has come out that's not Legends, that's not Expanded Universe, where we see female Zabrak that have similar horn structures, are largely bald. They might have like a top knot of hair that flows out of their heads or whatever and the like. But now we get to Dathomir and we have the Nightsisters, which at this point are portrayed as hairless, hornless beings. But then the Nightbrothers on the other side of the planet are Zabrak, just like Maul. So the question is like, what gives? Jay, I went down so many rabbit trails trying to figure this out. It is so convoluted.
I love that about you, though.
There's and okay, so indulge me here for just a minute.
Absolutely.
Again, yeah, we know. Okay, so there's a Zabrak, and there are, Eth Koth, for instance, is a Zabrak that served on the Jedi Order. He doesn't have all the crazy tattoo type stuff that Maul has on his face. And originally, when Maul showed up, everyone interpreted him as that all those markings were Sith tattoos. The episode guide makes that clear, and other sources that's not the case. That is a function of him being a Dathomiri Zabrak. Early explanations are that the Zabrak, much like humans, spread out across the galaxy and colonized various worlds. And that, the Zabrak originated on a planet called Iridonia. We don't know what the human homeworld is in the Star Wars galaxy. It doesn't matter. But regardless. And that the female Zabrak on Dathomir are Dathomiri Zabrak. They're a subspecies that, again, don't have horns, don't have hair. Except later, Asajj Ventress grows out her hair. And we see her in this episode younger when she had hair. So that explanation doesn't hold up. And it's only compounded by the fact that what did we learn over the course of the Ahsoka series? That there were Nightsisters from a completely different galaxy on the planet Peridia, on the outer edge of that galaxy. So which came first? The Nightsisters on Dathomir or the Nightsisters on Peridia? Whatever source different sources tell you different things. That the Nightsisters went from Dathomir on Purgils to Peridia, or the opposite happened in this regard. So I have no firm conclusion to this query. I gave up on all of this.
Oh, you're so good, though.
Thank you.
You are.
I appreciate that. It's just kind of it's one of those things where I both love and get annoyed by Star Wars, that they put so much information out there, and George Lucas's mantra is that everything serves the story. And so what the facts behind it are doesn't really matter. It's, what's his quote, continuity is for wimps in that regard. And I get that, but it's just kind of he has to know his audience. We're geeks here, right? We want to know the backstory about this stuff. I mean, we pale in comparison to the diehard Lord of the Rings fans on things that want to be able to tie, point A to B to C and know the histories and this, that, and the other. But I don't have a good answer for all of this. And it was slightly frustrating at the end of the day when I did that research.
But it's also so much fun, you know what I mean? Because you're just
yeah.
like me. I do this kind of stuff too, and I'll go down these rabbit holes or loath cat holes or whatever you want to call them. And so you brought up a lot of good points, and I think some of the answers actually lie a little bit in what we can gather from legends as well, because we had, for example, with the Nightsisters, as we just pointed out, they are not of this, they're more of a clan of witches. So they use the term sisters as not a bloodline kind of thing, as we were just mentioning. But I think that they're somewhat more related to perhaps the Singing Mountain clan kind of thing in, even going back to, as we said, with the Dave Wolverton novel, The Courtship of Princess Leia. So they're kind of a completely different breed, if you will, of Dathomirians. And I think with Mother Talzin and the whole thing, we even get to see some of the pods that the Nightsisters are born from. They're created. They're not actually, born, if you will, not to get into the birds and the bees of the things. But, you also brought up the idea of the Zabrak coming from Iridonia. And then there's also female Zabrak as well. I mean, look at Sugi, for example. I mean, we know Sugi from as a bounty hunter, and then and so on and so forth. So you've got that type of thing. So I think that again, as you pointed out with the tattoos, I think that comes from the allegiance to the Nightbrothers on Dathomir, as opposed to Eth Koth, as you pointed out, the Jedi who did not have those markings. So I think it depends on where they were brought up and what type of bloodline they come from. Because again, you've got your yellow Zabrak like Oppress, you've got your red Zabrak like Maul, Sugi is more pale. So you've got all of these different variations as well, kind of like Twi'leks, and you've got all the different colors of Twi'leks and so on and so forth. So I think, what we learned from Ahsoka and adding Peridia into the mix here does kind of convolute things a little bit, but it also gives us more of an opportunity to say, oh, okay, well, if they use the Purrgil to come from Peridia, maybe that's where the Nightsisters actually, did originate, and then they migrated to Dathomir and set up shop. So it's kind of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And we could talk about this for hours, I know.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Which came first, the chicken or the egg, when it came to Dathomir and Peridia. But the thing is that, there are sources to support everything you just said, but then there are other sources that say something completely different out there.
Sure.
And trying to separate the fact from the fiction, I was just like throwing up my hands, because it was like, what's the source for this? And there's a source for that. And then it relies on this. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is just getting so deep out there. And I've kind of concluded that Lucasfilm just hasn't given us enough on this. And I think they're enjoying the ambiguity, because it allows them to tell whatever story they want to tell. And maybe season 2 of Ahsoka will answer some of these questions, because we know the Nightsisters that were in Peridia are now back in the Star Wars Galaxy Prime, so to speak. And they brought a whole lot of coffin looking things that maybe were suspension pods. We'll find out in that regard. I'm fascinated by this. And I'm sure I sound a little bit frustrated, but I did enjoy kind of trying to figure out this answer on it. You were talking about their births from pods, but what did we actually see in the Clone Wars? Those were funeral pods that, when in a couple in later seasons of the Clone Wars, we'll see the Nightsister dead emerge from those pods to fight the Separatists.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it's confusing out there. And
Mm-hmm.
frankly, not to talk out both sides of my mouth, but taking a step back, part of me enjoys the ambiguity of all of this.
Oh, yeah.
We don't really need every last thing spelled out for us when it comes to all of this. And I think part of what makes the Nightsisters fun is the mystery to them. And the Star Wars.com, if you explore enough between the episode guide and some of the links you can find from that guide, really talks a bit about the magics that they have, and that it blends Force with other things on there. So it may not be 100% of the Force, but it definitely draws from the Force.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, a lot of possibilities. We could, as you suggested, do an entire episode talking about this as a point, and maybe we will, but we got a lot going on, so it's not going to be immediately. Okay. Well, I want to, we're going to go long on this one, but I want to touch on a few things. So we've been beating around the bush. Asajj gets to the Night Brothers village and tells Viscus. I love that the Night Brothers all have like these names that mean other things,
Yes.
Savage for Savage, and Feral, Maul, and now Viscus. It's kind of like Darth names in a way.
Yeah.
But rounds up a bunch of brothers, and then so she weeds out from a dozen, like 5 she wants to test, and she ends up killing 3 of them over the course of her various tests, which, assuming for the set moment that they do breed, you're really thinning out your pool in that
I
regard.
thought the same thing. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. Because I mean, you're like, well, who did Mother Talzin mate with in order to have Maul? But okay. Again, another conversation for another time. And so it all ends up, Asajj is just handing the feats to all these Night Brothers through these various tests, and basically spares Feral because Savage is like, no, face me. And then he surrenders himself to her. She takes him back to the village and performs the magics. And then that final trial we talked about already, where, Savage has to kill Feral to prove himself worthy about that. So we talked about the Nightsisters and stuff, but what do you think about the Night Brothers and, that arrangement there?
Well, I think it's really interesting how they basically live to serve the Nightsisters, essentially. So they're almost waiting to be farmed out in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're existing on their own and they're doing their whole thing. But as soon as Asajj shows up, you see them all kind of practicing their warrior skills and whatnot. It's very similar to reminding me of how the foundlings in The Mandalorian are taught from a very young age to fight and defend
Mm-hmm.
themselves, but they obviously have a very different focus for the reason that they're doing that. Whereas for the Night Brothers, it seems like they live to serve. And so it's kind of funny that Mother Talzin even says men are easy to acquire but hard to control.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another reason why she does the whole boop, and then augments him with the magics and then boops him back to life. And then, here he is. Now he's kind of like the super soldier, Captain America, if you will, of the Zabrak.
I like that.
So, and, but yeah, I mean, that was what I was thinking. I was like, oh yeah, he's kind of like Captain America here. But I loved watching the combat tests. And yes, Asajj was extremely brutal in her choosing of who she decided to even go through the trials. But I loved the kind of, almost Colosseum feeling kind of vibe that you got from this, and the columns that would come up and down, and they all had the Zabrak face on them and was carved out of the stone. And so that was pretty exciting, and getting to see that, and just Asajj putting herself to work. And I think a lot of that obviously was not just seeing who would be the most physical, but also she, turned off the lights to see who would respond the best in the dark. And we were just talking about this in, our Darth Bane discussion about how the Force can augment itself in the dark. And so I really, really liked that sequence.
Yeah, the thing that occurred to me while they were fighting in the dark is how much the Savage and Feral's eyes were glowing, that yellow.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what are they telling us here? Because that yellow eye thing was supposed to be like the Sith corruption, because that's what we see with Anakin, right? And Revenge of the Sith, after he's slaughtered the Separatist leadership, and he's out there on Mustafar just kind of overlooking the lava flow. His eyes turn yellow there.
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
and that was kind of born out of what we saw in Maul and the Phantom Menace. And now we just see all these Nightbrothers with these yellow eyes too. So I don't know how much we can actually conclude from all that, but that was an observation I had in that regard. The other thing with all of this is just I could not help but think of the Jedi Fallen Order game while watching the Nightbrothers here, because at one point, Cal Kestis goes to Dathomir, and I can't remember exactly what he's looking for there, but he meets Marin, one of the last
Mhm.
surviving Nightsisters, but he infiltrates the Nightbrother village.
Yep.
And, you were talking about how much they serve the Nightsisters. They hate everybody else that comes into
Yes.
contact with them. And they go way after Cal Kestis in that game.
Oh, yeah, good tie-in, I love that.
Yeah.
And getting back to the eyes, I think some of that is that they don't get the Sith eyes truly until they 100% turn towards the dark side. They're more just yellow, I think, almost like reminds me of when you're outside, at night with your dog, and there's a light that shines, and you can kinda see that reflection. That was what I was thinking.
You don't have cats.
I
Or
do
have
not.
had. I don't have cats now either, but I've had plenty. And I was thinking of cat's eyes in that regard.
There you go.
Yeah. But so, yeah. And so, all that happens. And I don't mean to minimize the whole trials things, because it's one of the coolest part, but it's one of those things that needs to be seen more than talked about.
Mhm.
But then they finally deliver Savage Oppress to Dooku, and he takes him back to Sereno, and then sends him out on his test, where he has to go to the Jedi Temple on Deveron. We see no Deveronians, but when he gets there, there's a number of battle droids finding clone troopers, and then these two Jedi, Halsey, who's a Runin, and Nox, who is Nautolan, and he brutally murders them with his enchanted blade, which is a whole other thing, because remember the Blade of Talzin from
Yeah.
Ahsoka that Morgan Elsbeth gets?
Mhm.
That's another aside. I'll save it for a second. But Savage just makes mincemeat out of them, and then goes back to Dooku, who vows to train him as an apprentice, and together they shall rule the galaxy, and they will be more powerful than Sidious in this regard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as much as Dooku's made out to be the pliant apprentice to Sidious, he definitely had his own designs on ruling everything one day.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, at this point, Savage is a mindless, not really mindless,
Mhm.
but he's very much altered state than what he was,
Sleeper
obviously.
agent.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And here's the thing also that I was thinking about with this as well is that they start calling him Savage Oppress at one point. And does that mean that Maul's last name was Oppress if he's from the same village? Would it be Feral Oppress?
I
And
that's a very good question. I don't know, because there's no reference ever to Maul being Maul Oppress on this.
Yeah, there's,
And
like, no last name, but yet Savage has one.
well, and the thing is that I bet if we asked Dave Filoni and stuff like that, he'd be like, that's interesting. And he'd hem and haw
Right?
and give us some sort of a curt answer about it, because and maybe he has thought about it here, but it kind of gets back to what I was saying about, well, and as you so eloquently put it, which came first, the chicken or the egg, Dathomir or Peridia in this case?
Mhm, mhm.
Did you all think about this, or you're just so busy making cool characters that it didn't matter to you, which is fine, but yeah.
Good question, yes, and
Yeah.
we could definitely go, once again, down so many rabbit holes with that.
Yeah, speaking of another rabbit hole, I just alluded to it a second ago, but Morgan Elsbeth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's supposed to be a Night Sister, that went to work for Thrawn and helped create the whole TIE Defender project and stuff like that. Good luck trying to pin down her history, beyond what we know from Tales of the Empire there.
Mhm.
There's a lot of sources that say she was in fact a human that was adopted by the Night Sisters. And then there's other sources that say she was in fact a Night Sister, true blood in that regard. So it's the point being, I think for me, is that I think to truly appreciate the Nightsisters, you cannot get so caught up in the finer details of that. We've got a lot of hints, a lot of suggestions, but not a lot of definitive answers there in that
It's
regard.
true.
I mean,
It's true.
you know, the last episode we saw Asajj Ventress's mother handing her over to a mercenary who later got killed. But then there's other sources like you just said that they're birthed out of pods, not, you know, which is it? So it's just there's a lot going on. It's kind of like Yoda in that regard. And maybe we don't get all the definitive answers, and we may be better off for it, not knowing everything.
Right. And I mean, there's so many things in Star Wars that's like that. I mean, we still don't have the definitive answer of how Anakin was even conceived by the Force, but how? You know,
Right.
so there's a lot of things like that in Star Wars.
Indeed. All right. Well, anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
Oh, I think we hit on just about everything that we needed to. Just such a great discussion. Had so much fun with it.
I hope Lucasfilm like approaches Katie Lucas and asks her to write more things, because
For sure.
this trilogy episode is so good, and I know she's written other episodes as well, but she's got a talent for Star Wars there. I mean, her dad's George, so
Truly.
you know. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and the latest entry in our The Clone Wars rewatch. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to make sure you get all of the episodes that we do as they come out, please subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. And while you're at it, we'd really love it if you could rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, especially Apple Podcasts. That helps get the show in front of more people. If you are curious about the entire back catalog that we have, all previous 1008 episodes, head over to retrozap.com. That's the best place right now. They're all there in one fashion or another. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody where we can be found online and across the internet?
Sure thing. So we're super easy to find. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out other places such as Pinterest. And we also have our 2 YouTube outlets. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. And then you can always drop us a line at podcaststardust@gmail.com and let us know your thoughts. And if you have any other information that you'd like to share as well. And then you can also pick up some of our merch over on our TeePublic site, and the link to that is in our show notes. And you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs on all kinds of things, from t-shirts and sweatshirts to even ball caps and socks now, and all kinds of fun things. So once again, hit up that link in our show notes.
All right. So you remind everybody what's going on in cosplay.
Yeah, so I have to say, like, I was really looking at Mother Talzin in this one thinking, could I make some animatronic little frilly frills out the back, you know, how they just kind of move on their own if I ever wanted to be Mother Talzin, but that's for another time. But you can check out what I'm currently up to on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay, as Ahsoka, Hera, the Fourth Sister by Mandalorian, concept design, as well as many, many other things.
Okay, upcoming on the show, and please keep in mind that everything here is flexible as Jay and I deal with some incredibly busy schedules this month. But the current plan is on Wednesday, we will have the next episode of World Between Worlds coming out, so look forward to that. And then on Friday, we'll be wrapping up the week with some Star Wars news, which we'll see. That may be a solo episode on my part. I don't know yet. All right. If nothing, hoping to get some old episodes of the podcast out as rebroadcasts, and maybe leaning into Mandalorian as we get closer to the Mandalorian and Grogu. But plans are in flux. But with all that said, thanks for listening to episode 1009 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.